This is one of the most depressing, like white pill episode ever. Welcome to the white pill. So Crohn's, people who are incompetent, the university system, fleeing New York, fleeing Canada. Our country's ruined. My city's ruined. My nephew's health is ruined.
End the year on a positive note. Everything will be fine. Michael Malice, welcome back to my podcast.
Thank you so much. I am actually really, really excited to do this.
Me too. This should be fun. I thought
Yeah,
this would
we
be a
always
good
have
way to
fun.
wrap up the year,
Can we
right?
start on a very depressing note that I think you
Mm,
could help me out a lot with?
okay.
So my nephew just got diagnosed with Crohn's, which is
Okay.
obviously no joke. He's 5 years
Yeah.
old, and my sister is
Oh,
just losing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's no fun. And my sister is kind of losing it, of course, because she's the mom and she's got to kind of act. My computer is glitching a little, but it's fine. Act all normal. But since this is something that you are so familiar with, like food issues and so on and so forth, do you have any advice, like especially dietary? Like there's got to be things that really set it
oh
off and
yeah.
things that easier. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have issues or have friends in the IBS spectrum, and that could be stuff that would be very informative to them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of people on Crohn's go on the diet I'm on, so the Lion diet, and put their Crohn's in remission. But I mean, so that's always like the last step of the diet is do what I'm doing. That seems to work for people. And little kids also seem to heal really quickly compared to having someone who's had an autoimmune disorder for 15 years go on it. But I would say if she could almost immediately eliminate all grains, all processed foods,
Okay.
um, and dairy. Dairy's a big one, um, and soy.
Okay.
Just doing that might help quite a bit. Now,
I'm gonna write this down right now.
yeah, so all grains, um, anything
Dairy. She
processed,
knows all this, but it's just good to hear it from someone else. Soy and dairy, grain, soy was the
dairy.
processed food. Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
yeah. The big ones are like gluten, dairy, soy. Getting rid of those can help a lot. And then you could
Okay.
just see eating as much meat as possible. Meat is that's the easiest thing on the gut, contrary to popular
Okay.
belief. But it's totally manageable. I mean, you have to first believe that it's manageable with diet and give it a try. But it is manageable with diet. But that's really sad. 5-year-old, that's brutal.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was like, kill me now, right? Because it's like you have to tell this 5-year-old you're never going to be normal. But then I thought to myself, you know what? There's lots of like kids who have like diabetes, right? And it sucks and you can never have candy. But you can't tell me with a straight face that someone who's diabetic can't have a thriving, fulfilling, wonderful life.
Hmm.
They just have to have a lifestyle that's a little different. So I looked at it that way. And the fact that she was on top of it immediately, and that he is like such a like a resilient little kid, like you're gonna have to get the good habits in place now, but like
Yeah.
once he's old enough to understand, like when I have this causes a flare up, and that's like not like that correlation thing. I don't think it's as bad. The more I thought about it, the more I'm like, wait a minute, I don't need to jump off a bridge. She doesn't need to jump off a bridge. It
Yeah.
sucks, but it's not anywhere near as bad as your first gut reaction is.
Yeah, I agree. Also, from a parent's perspective, I know that when I was diagnosed with arthritis, so I was 7 when I was diagnosed, it like destroyed my mom. But for me,
Yeah.
because I was just not aware of what was going on, I was like, ew, I have an old person disease. Like that was what I felt. But it wasn't like heartbreaking, emotional trauma. It was just like, oh, okay, I have that. I don't want to tell anybody about it. And that's as like far as I got mentally. So I think getting diagnosed with something when you're older is much more traumatizing than getting diagnosed when you're young,
Yeah.
even though it's more heartbreaking when you're young. I don't think it's as hard on the kid. So at least maybe she could take some solace in that. It's probably not nearly as hard on the kid as it is on her. And that you can treat it with diet.
Yeah.
And Scarlett's, she's 5 and she eats like a paleo diet. And what I've explained to her is sometimes at school she'll have something and then she'll run around like crazy if it's sugar or something like that. And I'll be like, that was because you ate this. And she's like, okay. And she's old enough
Yeah.
now to understand, okay, some things I eat and they hurt my tummy, and some things I eat and they do this. It's probably better to get started early. But I mean, being diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder when you're little is definitely not a joke.
Well, also it's kind of funny because I had stomach issues all my life. And then when I was in like my like late 20s, I think it was, I met someone who had Crohn's. And he told me about probiotics and they fixed me like almost overnight. And it was just such like a wonderful thing to be able to live without discomfort. But the thing is,
Wow.
so this was like 15, maybe 18 years ago. He had like stunted growth. He had a like I don't know if he had a colostomy bag or like just like a large section of the intestine taken out, like all that stuff. And I was when I heard this reaction, there's diagnosis. I was like, oh my God, this kid's like screwed for
Oh,
life. But my sister's like, you don't understand. Like in those 15 years, there's been so much progress made with diagnosing and treating this condition that it used to be straight to like a colostomy bag. You're going to be malnourished. She's like, it's not that way anymore. Like, especially if you're like kind of like a Whole Foods kid and you're just eating like a Whole Foods almost
yeah.
diet. Like, she's like, you're really not going to be doomed. And when I heard
Yeah.
that, I was so relieved.
Oh, good. And she already knows that. Okay.
Yeah. But it's always
Okay,
good to have like
great.
more information.
Yeah, yeah, no, I see people, I mean, I see people with crazy diseases go on the diet I'm doing and put themselves in remission, but a lot of people with Crohn's, especially if you get it early. If you get it
Yeah.
later, then you obviously there's more gut damage and things are harder to get under control.
And
But
and the
yeah,
thing that's interesting is my brother-in-law is like, well, at least it's not AIDS or something like that. But the joke is, and I'm going to use the word joke very broadly, thanks to all the research on AIDS, there is so much more understanding of how to fight autoimmune diseases. So it kind of does spill over into other areas. So this really
really.
is, yeah. Because I mean, if you have it now, they could, if you get AIDS, I'll tell this story. It's in poor taste, but I don't care. I was with my friend. Let's not mention her name. Let's call her whatever, Jill. And we're walking down the street in Manhattan and we ran to one of her friends, right? And she invited him to lunch, which I hate when people do. And she's like, I had to do it. I haven't seen him in a long time. So we're having lunch. It's fine. And we're at this diner and Friedman's in Manhattan. He goes to the bathroom and she goes, oh, this one time when I thought he was in the hospital with the flu, it was actually full-blown AIDS. She's like, okay, he's come back from the bathroom. I'm like, wait, what? So he comes back, but it turns out, first of all, I learned a couple of things. A, if you wash your hands enough times, they will bleed. But two, if you can go from full-blown AIDS to undetectable now, meaning he couldn't transmit it even if he wanted. That's how much under control AIDS has become, thank God. So it really
Hmm,
is so much better than, even before you were born, like, and people, it's just like automatic a death sentence. Now it's not.
that's cool. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
huge to get a
Yes.
virus under control too.
Yeah. And to have it where
Wow.
it's undetectable, like you can't even pick it up on a test and to go from full blown to that.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, the medical
Yeah.
system does
Yeah.
some things properly, even though a lot of the time I just spend insulting it. Sometimes surgery is very useful as well. But wow, that's impressive. That's great.
Yeah. So I'm very hopeful for his future. And besides, we got a second one, so that's a spare.
Hey guys, I finally launched After Party. This is the hangover pill I have been talking about. I mean, it's not a hangover pill, it's an anti hangover pill. It's the pill I've been talking about on my podcast for a while. It reduces my hangovers by 75 to 80%. I came across a study on rats when I was 20. I was dying in bed of a hangover, and I came across the study on rats given dihydromyricetin, and it eliminates their hangover and it eliminates a lot of the damage alcohol does. And I can remember talking to my friends after I sourced it online in these like sketchy powder formats, being like, you guys have to try this. It works. And they were just like, Michaela, what are you talking about? And they're still suffering from hangovers. So that's what happens. But you can go to smartdrugs.life. You can read a bunch of scientific studies there. You can order it. You can use code MP for 15% off. There's a 30-day money back guarantee. I hope you guys enjoy it. I never drink without it. And I wouldn't be selling a supplement because I don't supplement anything other than this for my bourbon sodas. If it didn't work, it works like the diet works. So check it out. Smartdrugs.life, code MP for 15% off, 30-day money back guarantee. Read the rat study. The rat study is really funny. That's it. That's all I have to say about this. Try it. Do you have horns on your chair?
Yeah. So I'm a Texan now. So
Oh
a
no.
nice supervillain chair. Let's see it. It's literally those
That's
horns. But I gotta kind of I've got
Does
kind
it
of a Cruella de what?
it doesn't spin too, does it?
Oh yeah, it does.
Oh my gosh.
So I got a Cruella de Vil thing going. So I've got like mammoth tooth pens here, and my belt is a hippo. I don't have the belt on me, but yeah, I'm basically my entire house is like a zoo.
That's hilarious. You have a hippo
Yeah,
belt?
yeah, hippo leather and a giraffe leather wallet. Oh, here's the giraffe leather wallet.
Wow. There you
Yeah.
go. Texas. I think the first time I went to Texas, I was in Fort Worth and I went into one of those shops and there were just emaciated stuffed lions and a
Ooh.
giraffe in there. I was like, this is what Texas is. I think this was 2018. Like, this is horrifying. But I think I was in antidepressant withdrawal at the time. So everything was kind of
Oh,
horrifying. But these stuffed animals, I was like, this is terrifying. There were chandeliers that are just made out of antlers and things. It's messed up.
I'm just imagining, hey Scarlett, we got you a stuffed animal. I don't want that. No. We'll put it by your bed while you sleep.
Just an emaciated lion. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the eyes are sparkling in the dark.
Yeah,
I don't want.
that's good. That's kind of how I felt in Fort Worth. That was also the first time I saw a child riding a sheep at a rodeo.
That's a
Have you?
thing?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Huh. I never heard of
And
that.
it's worth seeing. Fort Worth rodeos. They have a whole bunch of they're 5-year-olds and they put them on sheep to ride sheep around.
I feel like a sheep's back isn't particularly strong.
I don't know. It works.
Okay.
It works. It's worth seeing. So what are you doing? Okay, the purpose of this podcast
Yeah.
was to talk
It's
about
to talk
positive
crap.
things. Just to
Okay.
talk crap for an hour and a half. No, to talk about positive things, what you're looking forward to in the future, what you're happy about in the past year. Do you want to start
Yeah.
with good things that have happened in the last year?
Sure. I mean, we're gonna talk again when you finish reading my book, but my book, The White Pill, I was working on it for 2.5 years. So getting that baby out of me was uh I was just something I'm very happy about, very pleased about. It's selling well,
Yeah.
so I can kind of sleep happy.
Cathartic.
I think it was more like an exorcism because, well, I'm writing about all these horribly suffering people who have like their stories just been swept under the rug and kind of know, what happened in the Soviet Union, like why is communism so bad? What does it mean in practice? And when you just hear story after story, there's that whole line about like one death is a murder, like one death is a murder and a million deaths is a statistic, right? So
Hmm.
each one of those people, there's literally millions of people for decades, had a story of oppression. My buddy Trey was just in the Museum of Communism in Prague, which I highly recommend to everyone if they're in Prague. And that was the first time that it kind of hit me the extent to what my family had to go through. I was born in the Soviet Union. We escaped when I was, before I could remember, I was like 1.5 or 2. But that whole idea of like it's literally every aspect of your life. There's nowhere else to go, right? If there's a political system we don't like here in America, let's say you hate Trump or you hate progressives, like you could still to some extent get away from it. You could talk to people who are different, or you could read websites or read books. You can't do that. It's 24/7. And it all not only affects your ideology, it's also the material stuff. There's no food, you're cold. Like it's just constant. And like to have that as your background music since the time you're born is something I think it's almost impossible for us in the West, except for maybe some Cubans, you know what I mean, in America to kind of wrap their heads around. So kind of telling that story was very, I think, cathartic. I feel like it needs to be discussed so much more. I mean, it's discussed in the context of like you have like conservatives yelling that Biden's a Marxist and all this other kind of silly
Yeah.
stuff, but it's not really discussed what this was like, the Second World for that long. So I think kind of telling these people's story was something that I feel like I can go meet my maker and be like, okay, you kind of did your part.
Well, good for you. I'm interested. I'm looking forward to reading that book. I left, and I don't want to compare Canada to the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union was on a completely different level. But
Yes.
I know that how I feel being in Canada is a stress, just a societal stress
Yeah.
that I don't experience in Florida. And everybody there, so I am comparing them. but I also recognize that it's not the same. But I think there's a little bit of it there where everybody thinks the same thing. So,
Yeah.
they're like people are still wearing masks there and everyone's stressed out and everybody thinks like that. So and
Yeah.
you can't really find people who don't. Even if they kind of don't, they're still like, oh, no, 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 this is how you should think. Right. And it's stressful being there.
Yeah.
My parents were super stressed going, even from Australia back to Canada. They're like, oh, we're in Canada again. And it's just like there's an underlying fear or something there. It's creepy.
But it's also the kind of thing where like in the States, even as divided as we are and hopefully are going to increasingly become, you are
Hopefully.
painfully, well, yeah, I wanted a national divorce. You are painfully aware that there are people who think the other side of you, right? You can't
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
get away from like alternative points of view, whether you hate, like, whether you're progressive or whether you're a Republican, you're going to be sensing that other perspective. But and even in New York, which is a very liberal city, you're still going to have plenty of people who are like, screw all this. But I think despite Canada's great diversity in thought, there is a great deal of homogeneity. So this kind of idea that like it's not even that they would disagree with you. I feel like it's more like, what are you even talking about? It's just like you
Yeah.
sound like a crazy person. It's like, wait, even if I'm wrong, everyone I know who agrees with me, I know agrees with me. So you're not making any
Yeah.
sense. So it's even if they want to be kind of open-minded from their perspective, you're like a flat earther.
Yeah. 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 That's what's crazy about that place. In America, you're aware that there are people, even if you hate them, you're aware that there are people on the other side. And Canadians, I think, have always been brought up in we're the reasonable country. We've always been the reasonable country. We haven't been like America. Americans are kind of crazy. They're out there on both sides. Canada's
Yeah.
always been in the middle and reasonable. And now that reasonable has just, they still think they're reasonable, but it's so far. I don't know if it's left or if it's just an impingement on freedom, but there's definitely a stress there that you don't experience in Florida. Like people are still scared. It's very unfortunate because Toronto is such a cool place. It's
I know. I
creepy.
love Toronto. It's also, they could say with a straight face, I can steel man their argument. Trudeau's the moderate, the NDP are the left, the Tories are the right, the Liberals, Trudeau's party, are in the center. So like, if
Yeah.
you think Trudeau's too far to the left, something's wrong with you. Like, and you
Hmm.
can see how they get to that conclusion.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. And I'm glad was able to,
And it's still illegal for Canadians to come here if they are not vaccinated.
Oh, I
To come,
know. Okay, that's
I can't
crazy
wrap my head
because you
around it.
can go there,
Right.
but nobody's talking about how people who aren't American can't come to America unless they're not vaccinated. Yeah. Now, I've heard that they aren't checking like they used to, that people have kind of stopped checking, but that doesn't
Yeah,
mean that
who's
the
gonna roll
laws
those
have
dice at the
changed.
airport? Who's gonna roll those dice at the airport? That's
No,
crazy,
yeah, yeah, nobody. I know. It's nuts.
Yeah.
That's just, they're like, yeah, yeah, we're letting everything COVID go, but also if you haven't been vaccinated, you can't come to our country still.
And what that means in practice is the tourism industry, which means working families. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I feel like people aren't jumping up and down about that like they were about a lot of the mask mandates.
I don't think it's on the radar screen as much because it's so weird. And second, they just renewed it. I think it's going to be around until April, I think they said. It's so weird. And it's not like Canada, some like awful third world country where you have some weird kind of like parasite, right? You come in here and you're going to spread it and everyone's going to get that amoeba that goes in your eyes. That's not,
Yeah.
it's Canada. But the biggest undefended border on earth, but still.
Yeah. You can't get medicine there. I went there and I tried to get cough syrup for Scarlett and I couldn't get cough syrup. Like Shoppers Drug Mart. They're out of kids' medicine.
Wait, in
In
Canada?
Canada, yeah. So this isn't everywhere. People in the comments are gonna be like, well, but no, in general, there's a massive children's medicine shortage in Canada. And right now, emergency rooms are overrun because RSV, because kids have not been outside in like, what, 3 years, basically. And in Canada, like specifically, a
Holy
very long
crap.
time, they're getting RSV, and RSV is already dangerous for kids. They're getting it worse. So emergency rooms are having issues. They've had issues forever because they've always been terrible, but the RSV is way worse, and it's very difficult to get any type of like cough medicine, Tylenol for kids. It's like gives you communism
How are you going
vibes in there.
how are the kids supposed to trip?
I don't know. The scissor, they're all out of scissor.
We got the lean, but now we need the medicine. These poor children.
I don't even know where scissor was being stored in my brain. The good old
I
days,
like how
lean
the,
and
the whitest girl on earth knows what scissor is.
yeah, it's there was a rough period of time, pretty much the entire time being a teenager. I definitely knew what scissor was. Uh, that's funny. That's good. So, okay, moving away from scissor and lean though. You mentioned that you'd be totally okay if we had a national divorce.
Yeah, I was the first one to get people started talking about this when I had a piece in early 2016. I brought it back into like national consciousness. Um, I think that I think it's definitely heading in that direction. I think it's very healthy. I think America has had at least two ruling ideologies since the beginning, and we've been held together with like masking tape and staples. And I don't see any good reason and few bad ones to continue this charade that we're one culture. It's only a little confusing because the shared language and the shared history, but language is decreasingly shared in that you have different like for example, even journalists, if you're going to talk about like one article on the right will talk about tax increases, the other will talk about revenue generation, like pronouns, different terms are used in different ways to these separate cultures. And of course, each of those two broader meta cultures have subcultures. There's nothing holding this country together. Everyone hates each other. So why continue with this? It's just like, yeah, it's going to be a painful conversation. And how do you divide it? Who gets the nukes? But these
Yeah,
are all the questions that go on in a negotiation. And I think the faster we get started with this, the better.
I don't think there's any way that would ever happen. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't see how that would
Why?
ever happen. Well, what is California and New York? Are they
I
going to
can
be
prove I can
together?
prove you
But
wrong. That I can prove you wrong. If I asked you and everyone listening to this in 2014, which was 8 years ago, which of these two things is more likely? Texas declares its independence from America, or Donald Trump gets elected president? Literally 99% of the people listening to this would say the
Texas.
first one,
Yeah, yeah.
and they'd be correct. So I mean, it doesn't have to be 50-50. It could be just Texas. And I was on the Blaze for election night, and we all had to do our national divorce map. And I had Texas as one thing, and then for the rest, I wrote IDGAF, like I don't give an F for the rest of the country. Like you guys can do what you want. Like as long as Texas reclaims its sovereignty, we'll be fine.
You were already living in Texas at that point, or no?
Oh yeah, I've been here for a year. Yeah, yeah.
I think Florida is better than Texas, so I'm more of a fan of Florida
How
than
how
Texas.
how is Florida?
Texas made me
I listen.
sneeze.
This is the kind of rivalry I could get my hand behind. I was actually very disappointed, and as a former lifelong New Yorker, shocked that we're at a point now where LA is better than New York City. I was just in New York over the summer because Tim Pool had put up a billboard of me in Times Square. So I'm like, all right, bucket list. I got to go see this thing in person. And then I was in LA as well, and I'm like, holy crap, I'd rather be in LA. It's less screwed up, less unsafe, more happening, more thriving, more upbeat, more like it was just very, very sad to see. But I am very happy here
Huh.
in Texas. And there's lots of friends I have in Florida who are also former New Yorkers, including my family and my aforementioned sister and nephews. So they're having a great time there. So I don't miss New York. Well, no, I miss New York with every fiber of my being, but she's dead. So I don't need to see this kind of corpse that they're beating the crap out of on a daily basis. It hurts.
Hmm. That's interesting. So I'm not that familiar with New York. I've been to New York twice this year. I thought compared to Toronto, it was doing okay, but I wasn't really in it. So I don't really know what the difference was. I went to California though. I
Well,
thought California was in pretty rough shape.
it might be doing better than Toronto, but it's not doing better than it was. So I left in August of
Yeah.
2021, and I'm like, all right, it's been a year. Things have settled down with these like absurdities of these lockdowns and mandates, whatever. And I came back, and it was like a good 25% of the storefronts were still unopened. Um, it's the crime is and like when you're a New Yorker, you just kind of pick up on unsafe vibes. They were through the roof compared to what it used to be.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I said this
Okay,
before,
okay.
like I was within an hour of being there. I saw a guy peeing on a truck in the street, not on the sidewalk. And people are like, oh, that's just New York for you. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I've been there all my life. That's not a thing. Like, maybe you'll see someone peeing against the building, but like against the truck in the street, and during the
Mhm.
daylight, you know what I mean? Right next to McDonald's, mind you. So, and all the places I wanted to hit were gone. Like, if I've said this point, I don't even know how many times by now. If I want to open up a restaurant or a boutique or a cool stationery store, all the already it was like if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, right? So already the deck was stacked against you at coming to New York to do that. But now it's just a complete, absolute, almost impossibility. And especially because there's so many other cities that are up and coming and thriving. Like go there and be that big fish in the small pond. And you're just gonna have the time of your life doing it. So I think that's the thing that Austin and Miami, to some extent Nashville as well, is my understanding. Like these are the cities where
Mhm.
people are refugees from their own countries, and they're this kind of communities that are coming up are just really exciting.
Here, here. I agree. I agree. I'm glad you're having a good time in Austin. That's fun, especially having to uproot yourself. But you have a bunch of friends there, right? Do you just party all the
I
time?
have
How often do you
I
see
have
other people?
I see them all the time. Like that was the thing I didn't realize towards the end of New York is how lonely it got. And it wasn't just lonely because of lockdown stuff. It
Yeah.
was lonely because it's like you're playing poker, right? And at certain points, people are like, all right, I'm out. I'm out. Like that's the straw. That's the straw. And like one by one, my friends got picked off. And then also like once you leave it, you don't appreciate how brutal the winters are. You don't want to leave the house. It gets dark early. You're in this kind of bunker mode, and just when you think you can't take another week of it, that's when it gets warm. That's like the seduction of New York, and then you get to walk around and it's warm and it's fun and great. And then like every year, lather, rinse, repeat. And now I'm here. It was 80 degrees this week, in December,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I don't miss that cold weather. I miss having an opportunity to wear all these cool sweaters I own, but like that's a price I'm willing to pay. So, it's there's such a Venn diagram here of cool people, making things happen. There's so many different scenes. There's the biohacking scene, there's the crypto scene, there's the podcasting scene, there's the comedy scene, and there's just like and there's that whole kind of white people Whole Food scene, which I'm not particularly party
Hmm.
to, but there's just so much great
Hmm.
stuff happening here, and everyone knows each other. So that kind of sense of community is something New York definitely used to have and completely lost, and now to have it rediscovered here is just really exciting. I have turned my space into my house into like kind of a uh, like um like an event place, and when people come by, I throw parties for them, and everyone gets together and kind of bros out. It's really fun.
That's fun. I don't have that in Florida yet. I think because I haven't met that many people and I'm kind of a, I don't go out a ton. I have the people I work with. We're very good friends. All the people I pay to be friends with me are friends with me. But
Well,
other than that,
I'm gonna be there next month. We're doing like a trip, and I'm like, all right, who wants to come Miami? And it's like 11 of us. So we're gonna get like a
yay.
like a mansion Airbnb, and it's gonna basically be like Rock of Love or something. It's gonna be so much fun.
Okay, amazing. That sounds great. Miami's great. I love it. What's the worst thing about Austin?
Um, the worst thing about Austin is it kind of closes down early. There's not that much to do. Like New York, there was always something to
Ah.
do, and here, like there's not really that. It's much more something to do is like going to people's houses and socializing as opposed to like going to a museum, going to some cool restaurant. That's not as much of a thing here, so that's a little frustrating. But like I've got a buddy and we just go to different places all the time and hang out, and we're discovering more and more. So that kind of is a problem. It's a problem that's getting better every day. So that's kind of exciting about it.
Okay, that's cool. Um, I feel like Miami's got the opposite problem. I keep making dinner plans. I made dinner plans at 6 and was just laughed at. They're like, no, 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 dinner is at 9. Then you go to the
Yeah.
bar at 12, and then at 4 a.m. there's a performance. I was like, what? 4 a.m.? I can't handle that.
Well, I go to bed at 2. What time do you go to bed?
Okay, well, since I met Jordan, he's just destroyed. Apparently, he had a good sleep schedule before he met me too, and we've just destroyed each other's sleep schedule from like working too late and like talking too much. It's basically enjoying each other. It's good. It's enjoying each other's company enough that it's disrupting my sleep schedule and making me into a worse person. So it's not ideal, but I used to go to sleep at 10:30. Like I need to go to sleep at 10:30. Um, and now I probably go to sleep at like 12 or midnight, 12 or 1
12
probably.
midnight.
And this
Is,
is what happens
is
when
that
you go to
Canadian
sleep
time?
late.
I was making fun
No,
of
it's
I was making fun of my friend.
destroying my brain.
I had a friend from Prague. I have a friend from Prague, Simon, and he has a funny accent. So we always make fun of him like he's like from some like Martian country. And like I just told him that what do you guys have like a 36-hour day over there? And like, you don't whatever. And we went to a cafe and the cafe said it was open until 14 a.m. And I'm like, look, I told you you guys have a 36-hour day here. He's like, what the hell is that? So yeah. But it's fun. I like being a night owl um because there's something a little like kind of cool about being outside when everyone's asleep. You just feel like you're kind of a rule breaker in like the easiest way possible.
Uh, I don't know. I can't do it anymore. And I feel like my mom always went to bed at like 9:30 or 10 and she'd just disappear. She'd just disappear. And my dad would be like, "Did your mom go to sleep without saying anything again?" And that was like just every single night. And now he goes to
It's
bed early too. But I can feel her in me making me tired enough that I get like rageful if I stay up. Like it hurts my body staying up. I used to go to bed at
I
2, no problem, and like I can't do it,
I get
but I do
rageful if
it.
I have to wake up early. I'm really a nasty, nasty piece of work. If I don't get
Yeah.
my sleep, if I wake up early, I can't do it.
Okay. So I think the problem with me is I have to wake up early. So I'm waking up early and going to sleep. So going to sleep late is kind of the equivalent of waking up too early. I
Yeah, yeah.
know that the later I stay up, the less sleep I'm getting, and it makes me rageful.
So what are you
It'll
what are you
change.
optimistic and happy about? I mean, getting married's a big one.
Yeah. Getting married was great. That was fantastic. I was always worried probably in a relationship that I'd get bored.
Yeah.
uh, because I get bored. I need a lot of different activities to do. I wouldn't be able to just have like one job. I'd get bored of the job. So I was always worried I'd get bored. And it hasn't been, I mean, it hasn't been super long. It's still a short relationship, but I'd usually get bored around the 9 month mark, pretty standardly. And I'm most definitely not bored. So that's a huge relief. Because I had decided as a person, especially going through a divorce and having a kid, I had decided, okay, I'm going to be by myself forever. And I had just become okay with that because I was pretty good at being alone too.
Yeah.
It was like having a kid and being alone is quite lonely. It like adds a level of loneliness having a kid at the same time, even though it's another person. But I've gotten used to the idea of being alone. So not being alone is so much better. Like I'm such an extroverted person that I would rather spend. I was talking to Chris Williamson about this because I was like, I actually enjoy spending 95% of my time or even like 98% of my time with another person if I like that other person.
Okay.
Like whether
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
friends
Yeah.
or a relationship. I hate being alone. Even if I'm working, I used to go work in cafes, so at least there were people around me. And he said he was like the opposite. He'd rather spend 95% of his time alone. It's like, ugh, I don't
I
like that at all.
used to be like that until very recently, and I don't know what changed in me, but I always consider myself to be a hardcore introvert. I still do, but now I'm realizing that if I don't like see someone every day or like fairly regularly, I start to go crazy, and that I'm not as
Me too.
introverted as
Me
I
too.
thought I was. Now that being said, I don't think most people are fun to spend extended amounts of time with.
Yes.
Like you said, like a lot of people like just it's just like small talk or like, their opinions on whatever's in the news. And it's like you're not gonna have that kind of intense fun. I took something away from this. I don't want to have a conversation with someone. I want to have an experience with someone, right? Like a story. Like let's do something awesome. Let's tell me something amazing. Like that. Those kind of relationships are the kinds of thing that make life just so much more exciting and interesting. And not that many people can deliver that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
other thing that's a problem that I had to learn is when your brain tries to get you to isolate when it's not doing well. So if you are like feeling lonely, it'll tell you not to reach out to people, and then it becomes this spiral. And you have to
Yeah.
override it and be like, okay, my brain's giving me the absolute worst advice. Go out and hang out with someone you like. Even just go get ice cream. It doesn't matter. Just do something. And human beings are much more social animals than we let ourselves realize, even those of us who are like fiercely independent.
Yeah, I agree. That's what's rough about depression too, I think, is that you get depressed and then
Yeah.
your brain tells you to be by yourself and then that contributes to being depressed. And yeah, like you said, that's rough. But good
It,
things. Good things. So
I
getting
actually
married
had
was good.
I actually had to deal with that in the last week because the book came out, which I've been working on for so long. And then like there was a little issue with Amazon with the pricing, which was resolved in a day. And they haven't even sent them out yet, right? And like it was kind of a big anticlimax. It's not like a movie premiere where you have the premiere and there's a red carpet and everyone's there, right? It's like the book's out and then it's kind of like crickets, even though the sales are very good. It was like the top new release in politics for the week. Take that, corporate publishers. And then I was talking to my
Yeah.
buddy, and she's like, "You're you're so used to media where you put out a tweet or a YouTube and you get instant feedback that when you didn't get that, you're thinking this is like a flop, even though you haven't even started your promotion tour. So no wonder you're like feeling like all kinds of way." And when I realized that, I'm like, "Holy crap, this is as old media as it gets, like books. Give it time to breathe. It hasn't even reached people's hands yet." Then I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, I can relax." I am someone who's very bad, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are the same way. Someone who's very bad at relaxing and telling myself it's okay to
Yeah.
have a day where you're just messing around and watching shitty TV and just not doing anything. It's fine, you know what I mean? Like, but it's hard for me to do that sometimes, especially after 2 years of working on something that's so intense to kind of, and it's like it's okay like to take a week off after 2 years of producing a book that you're very proud of.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm terrible at that as well. And it's silly because you can burn yourself out. You can't just work all the time. You actually need to take the
Yeah.
rest time to recover so you can be more productive. But I have such like guilt and an antsy feeling if I'm
Yeah.
not working on something or
Yep.
pushing a project forward or making progress in some way. Uh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm terrible at that. So I feel you. I feel you. But also for you, I mean, you
Yeah.
haven't started podcasting and talking about the book yet, right?
Yeah, like
Have you hit many
this is the
podcasts?
first one. This
Yeah.
isn't even the real one. You haven't read it yet. So I've got all these shows booked in January. I haven't even gotten my physical copies. I just got these like author copies, not for resale. So I can't even, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
that's cool
maybe when
though.
I get my own copies, then I could start. Yeah, yeah. So it was fun. Yeah. So it's it's uh it's just it's exciting to have it done. And I really am thinking 2023 is going to be a very good. The thing is, a lot of people I know, and I want to hear your thoughts with like the people you know, are really going through it right now. And I reached out to another friend of mine, and because she's, has had to deal with postpartum after her kid, and I asked her for feedback. She goes, "You don't
Oof.
understand. Like everyone I know right now is just kind of suffering in some way, and it's not you. And books are hard." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that made me relieved." But I feel like a lot of people I know are really just kind of not in a good way. Has that been your experience with your like social group?
You know, honestly, I don't mm, not really. A couple of months ago it was. A couple of months ago I had like it was ridiculous. I had like six major serious work issues come up. Like serious work issues come up
Wow.
in the same week. Like it all happened at the same time. And I was asking
Oh,
people,
wow.
and everyone was talking about how they were having a rough time. So I feel like the impacts also of COVID and how weird it's made the world hasn't worn
Yeah.
off on people. I think my experience is a little bit different because I dealt with my dad being so sick for like
Sure.
2 solid years. So there was just nothing that was so awful that anything now is not like that. That was just like movie drama bad. So things are pretty good. I'm physically exhausted, and I think I might be coming down with a horrifying toddler flu. But other than
Oh,
that, things are pretty good. Yeah. So this might be my last podcast. We'll see if I make it through that. Whatever Scarlett has, children are a blessing.
it's funny. Like I didn't. What else? So what else are you hopeful about for the next year? Like, is there something big project that's like on the shelf or
Oh,
something?
yes. Yes. Uh, I've been working on Peterson Academy.
I saw the
Um,
logos. Yeah, I like them.
oh yeah, yeah. We're trying to we put it up on Twitter, and for like the first time in my experience of Twitter, people were helpful. They're like, well, kind of. They're like, that sucks. You shouldn't use either of them. It's awful. But here are some alternatives, and there were some good ideas in there. So we're making different iterations of the logo now. But I've been working pretty hard on Peterson Academy. We're going to launch late next year.
Okay.
And so that's, I'm so excited about that. I think it's going to be huge. Hopefully, we completely decimate the current university system, which is just such a scam.
Uh,
Um,
I think
so,
if it was just a scam, I would feel a lot less contempt and animosity towards these people. If it was just like you gotta, like how if it's just like you gotta pay 100 grand to get this piece of paper to have this job, and it's just a con, like I can wrap my head around it. But the fact that they're turning so many people into like Camille Paglia, who's like probably my biggest role model, she just made the comment that college campuses are institutionalized neurosis, that they make people mentally ill by design. The fact that they're harming so many people, even the debt aside, that to me is the real problem. And what I'm most excited about is, the three legs of the cathedral stool are the government, the media, and the universities. And the universities, in my opinion, are not only the most malevolent, but also have been the most untouchable, because government people attack politicians constantly. That's their job. They know it's their job. They're
mhm.
gonna get you run for an office, the other person is gonna call you a demon. That's part of the gig. Media, you've had media criticism. It's amped up, and journalists, especially now in Canada, are like crying that like wherever they go, they just get inundated with uh nowhere near as much hatred and animosity as they deserve. But college professors, no one ever talk like, other than like people who are public figures like your dad, or Steven Pinker, for example. They were kind of like totally behind the barricades, and now, thanks to social media, they are really feeling the fire. And anything that gets them to lose their status and respectability and clout is just the most wonderful. And that is what's going to save America, is defeating the enemy class. So the fact that it is already in 2020, and I think literally all the signs are in the positive direction. Yeah, if I had to choose between a Harvard degree and starting a business at age 18, and like being self-taught through either the Peterson Academy or YouTube videos, I would still choose the Harvard degree because that credential is as good as it gets. But that lead is shrinking daily, and it's not going to last for much longer. And already it's the case that there are some startups where they see an Ivy League credential and they think two
Mhm.
things: this person is probably very bright, and this person is probably going to be trouble, because they're going to be bringing
Yeah.
their infected ideology and causing a problem for me in my office. And like, I don't have enough bullshit on my desk running this startup that I need to deal with their fucking 2 cents about and politicizing literally everything. So I think that is something that is going to be changing in an entirely positive direction in the next 5 to 10 years. And I don't see how they recover from it in the same way as publishing. Like, it wasn't that long ago,
Mhm.
5, 10 years, that like Simon and Schuster published me, or Penguin, or Random House. It's still a major deal. But now, like people like me, David Goggins, there's like no shortage of people who are putting their work out themselves. It's not in the bookstores, but it's still on Amazon. Goggins, I think, is it's still on Amazon, the same as any other book. And it's like what that Random House credential gave me is almost now entirely worthless, if not a detriment.
I've been trying to kind of talk to dad about that. He's like, yeah, but it's Penguin, because he wanted to be published by Penguin for so long, like throughout his life. And I was like, nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
No one cares anymore. It doesn't matter.
Because
Uh,
I'm sorry, like if you
yeah.
ask people on the street which is a bigger credential, Jordan Peterson or Penguin, it's really now a lot of people hate him, but I don't think
Yeah.
even me, who's got how many dozen books under his belt, if someone says I'm with Penguin, I'm not like, or as opposed to like, oh, I have an interview with Jordan Peterson. Like, which of those two things is going to be more impressive, right? It's night and day.
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. We're trying to, so with Peterson Academy, we're trying to get around the accreditation part. We're trying to get accredited, first of
Wow.
all. And it would be absolutely crazy if we could get kind of up to date 8-hour courses taught in a, either freestyle lecture or kind of Q&A. If we can get that kind of thing accredited, that would be
Yes.
insane. But I've also been thinking, like, if you can get a degree and you can show employers that this degree is
Yes.
valuable, if you can go to employers and say, hey, this is a Peterson Academy student, would you hire them? And they say yes, then the degree part kind of becomes worthless. Like,
Yes.
if it's supposed to lead to a job, all you need to do is become a student that's good enough to get hired. And so, yeah, I think it's silly. Like, the Harvard degree, yes, it's worth a lot just to get that degree, but it's not useful, right? And it's ridiculous that you can go on YouTube and you can go online and you can learn way more in a shorter period of time than you can at university, but that's not taken seriously.
Right.
So there's this gap right now, and hopefully Peterson Academy can kind of fill that niche, because there's a huge niche of an area that's an issue. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah.
Very
And I
excited.
don't think they see it coming. I think in their minds, and they're not entirely wrong, Harvard will always be Harvard, like the Catholic Church will also always be the Catholic Church. You'll always be the Pope. But what the Pope is now is not what the Pope was, 200 years ago. And same with Harvard, what it is now, it does not have to be what it was 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And it's still going to be a great shit to have. And it's just like, great, okay, you went to Harvard, but to have that be the be all and end all, I mean, it's because there's so many young people, and I'm sure in your audience as well, who are like, the tools are there, Shopify, whatever, Big Cartel, whatever it is, who are out there making
Yeah.
something happen. And if you have a job interview and you're like, I don't have a degree, but like I started this t-shirt company and this is how much sales we make, and I understand the inside and out, like I want to hire that kid as opposed to someone who
Hmm.
has a degree who hasn't accomplished anything. I mean, that's the biggest, to be a pragmatist in a philosophical sense, the biggest proof of the efficacy of some philosophy is that it actually works. And this kid has shown that it works.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know, and I'm probably more biased. Well, I'm way more biased than maybe the average employer, but I've hired a couple of people, and I'm not saying everyone from Columbia has this issue, but I hired a couple of people who had master's degrees from Columbia, being like, oh, this person's going to be bright. So awful, such awful human beings that now I'm, unfortunately, anyone who has a Columbia degree, I'm like, oh my gosh, just in case they're like that, those other people I hired from Columbia, that's going to be an issue. Then I've hired people who've been doing social media and are making money on their own and have an online product and understand, like you said, Shopify or something. They're like, hey, I'm 21, but I've built this whole
Yeah.
thing. And I'm like, okay, you're like, take you while you're young. You're going to be a very useful person,
I
as opposed to someone who's like 30 and has a master's degree and thinks that they're smarter than you.
and they also have the thing with those 30-year-old, those Columbia people, is they have this sense of entitlement, but also what's worse is that there's no sense of shame in the idea of if they screw up something really bad, because I was a business major, but there's something they beat into us. Like if you are given ownership of like a project or part of a project or project, as you would say, like you have to make sure that it buck stops here. But with them, it's like, oh, I didn't get around to doing it, or oops. And it's like you screwed up this whole thing. And it's just like people make mistakes. It's like, but you're in charge. This was your responsibility. And they completely don't understand or care that like it's like their work isn't their problem. And to me, that's so,
Yeah.
maybe it's because I'm self-made to have that kind of be your background music. I can't talk to people like that. I don't get it.
Yeah. I no, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. You're supposed to, clearly, they haven't been listening to Jocko at all, right? But like extreme ownership,
Yeah.
you should be feeling, I think it's better to feel guilt for things that you didn't have control over. Not guilt necessarily, but responsibility for things you didn't have control over. I think that's the only way I got out of my autoimmunity. At some point, I was like, okay, it's not exactly my fault, but something I'm doing is wrong,
Yeah.
right? And that's the only way. Otherwise, it's like nothing I'm doing is wrong. I've been listening to everyone else, and then you're just stuck being sick forever. Or like, well, obese people, for instance, too. You're doing something to put your body in that situation. Even if there's a whole bunch of a set of unfortunate circumstances, like getting diagnosed at 5 years old with Crohn's. That's not your fault. But unfortunately, you have to take some responsibility. You can't when you're five, obviously. Unfortunately, you have to get older. So it's fortunate that his mom is like aware of these things. But even if your situation absolutely sucks, I think the only way kind of out of it is to take responsibility for it,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
she's very big and like I'm not gonna ruin his quality of life. I'm not gonna have him thinking himself as I'm a victim. So they're having like a little birthday
Yeah,
party for the
great.
class, and she's like, oh, maybe he shouldn't come. And the teacher got on the phone. She's like, no, no, the kids all like him. Get him there. And it's like, okay, you can't have the regular cookies. You're gonna bake those special cookies that you can eat, and you're gonna give them out to the whole class.
Yeah.
So instead of you being like this
Nice.
freak, it's like, okay, now we're all taking part in this activity. Everyone's gonna enjoy it. The cookies are delicious and it's you're owning it and without having to feel like you're missing out on anything.
Oh, that's great. That's the right way to go about it. With Scarlett, she has birthday cake, but it's like a watermelon with fruit around it.
Okay.
I was like, yeah. It's been ingrained so long too. I think it's almost easier when you're younger. Like, imagine trying to
Yes.
change your diet and stop eating normal cool foods like pizza when you're like 13 or 14. That's hard.
No, I mean that's for the
So,
kids who become vegan and they're all like miserable.
yeah, true. That's true.
It's the girl who listens to The
Yes.
Cure. Maybe they don't do that anymore with people your age, but they listen to The Cure and she writes in her journal with fingers gloves and she goes to Hot Topic and she, is
I remember fingerless
yeah, she
gloves.
won't eat meat and she's not a happy camper. And I'm sure her cycle is all screwed up too. To be
Birth control as well.
yeah.
Brutal. Brutal. Okay. Is there anything else you're excited about in the
This
future?
has been such. This is one of the most depressing, like white pill episode ever. Welcome to the white pill. So Crohn's, people who are incompetent, the university system, fleeing New York, fleeing Canada. Our country's ruined. My city's ruined. My nephew's health is ruined.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, this has been a bit of a downer. I know, or like
but
end the year on a positive note. Everything will be fine.
do you know what the biggest positive note is? And I'm sure you will agree with this, and most people agree watching this will agree as well. It has become so much easier and people are seeking out so much more to connect with one another now that this COVID regime has receded. People are doing things together. They're going to shows. They're traveling more. They're
Mm-hmm.
interacting more. They're not in that bunker mentality. They don't have to worry about being yelled at on the street. For the most part, I'm sure some place like in Boston, it's still an issue. That's fine. I think that renaissance in the idea of community is something in at least in my experience and the experience of pretty much everyone I know is very much on the rebound. And I think that is something that I am extremely excited about looking forward in the coming year because I think a lot of us, I'm sure a lot of us, if not all of us, lost a lot of our relationships or they all took a hit during the last couple of years, especially because there was this kind of binary where either you wear a mask or you're indifferent to human life, right? That's the mentality. And I think that that's now that's kind of off the table and people don't have to have that very basic, like you're both people looking at each other like they're crazy. Like now that that's kind of receded, I think people are reestablishing those bonds. And I think if you're someone who's out there who is all alone, and I certainly count a lot of those people like among my fans and my audience, reach out to like social media for all its, negativity and hostility is really a great mechanism to find people to talk to of a like mind. Find a hobby. It could be stupid, right? But I'm sure that the people who breed like guinea pigs, they have a thriving community, and I'm sure the there's this group who hates that group and they think they're the
Mm.
worst, and these ones hate this ones because they're not the real breeders. Point being, there's so many activities out there that are easy for someone to find and go down a rabbit hole and get excited about, and there's going to be other people like that. And it's a very easy way, if you haven't been effective at making friends on an interpersonal level in your life, doesn't mean you're going to have to be alone forever. They don't even have to know your name. So if people are kind of repudiating you online, change your behavior, change something about it. You have that control to be a more social person next year than you have been this year. And it may take trial and error. A lot of people are socially awkward, but that's the beauty of the internet. You have the anonymity. So you can kind of figure out what works for you and just do some research and read some articles about, like, okay, how do you make friends? I think people don't even realize that that's a technical skill that they can develop. And humans have these courtship rituals, and they work in not just romantically, they work in socially. And a lot of times people are friends with people at their work because you're kind of forced, or school because you're stuck together. And when you're like working at home, you're going to lose that. You lose that human contact. How do you regain it? Well, there's lots of different mechanisms for doing that. And I think that's the kind of thing I would encourage more people who are lonely, and there's a lot of them out there, to be like, wait a minute, this is something that I can improve on. And it's going to take me out of my comfort zone, but that's kind of fun too, to try new experiences.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And social media groups, even I don't like Facebook, but even Facebook groups, they're dying off. But even Facebook groups are a good place. Facebook groups are a really good place to meet people. But Twitter, I know a lot of people who've met on
Oh
Twitter.
yeah.
I know like most of my good friends are through social media.
Yeah.
Almost all of them. Maybe all of them.
And then they introduce you to other people, and it's then you're kind of
Yeah.
pre-vetted. So you have this element of familiarity right from the jump. So it's just really just a great thing. And I think I wish more people. The thing that I talk about, and I know you agree with this a lot, is we are so. If you like with me with having stomach issues, right? If you live a certain way your life, your entire life, just like you with your autoimmune, I'm sure in your head you think this is how I'm going to be when I'm 80. And then
Yeah.
once that first thing that you had your whole life changes, you realize, wait a minute, every aspect of my life is open to change.
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfect, but it can be improved. And that sense of freedom is almost existential. It's really very, very liberating and exciting.
Yeah. I like that. That's what happened to me. Like you said, it was as soon as one part fell away, I was like, oh my gosh, how much of it? And then three more parts fell away, and I was like, oh no, is it everything? Is everything malleable? Is everything a lie? But it's good because that means you have control. You have control in a way. It took me a long time to understand I had control of my relationship, which I think people get, you know, how people get trapped in
Oh yeah.
relationships and you're like, why are you still in that?
And they
And
have
I'm
their own
a, like,
language.
yeah. And I'm a bright person, but it took me a long time to wrap my head around that like I had control of my relationship. So also if you're stuck somewhere in a relationship you don't like and you have been for like 5 years, you should not be in that relationship anymore. You
Yep.
should just end it. Your life is going to get better, not worse.
People have that sunk cost fallacy where they're like, think about it this way. If you have a house and it costs you $100,000, and then every month you got to get a new roof, new garage, new kitchen appliances, new floor, whatever. And you're like, oh, I spent 200 grand on this house now.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? Doesn't mean you have to spend another million. Like, that money is gone. You're not ever seeing that money again, right? Or those 5 years are gone. Just because you've spent five, and I'm sure large parts of it, of those five, were good, does not mean you have to spend the next 50. And like, and it doesn't mean even if you, and this idea, like, is this really the best? Being single for a while is also not the end of the world. It sucks. Dating
Mhm.
sucks. It's horrible. But is this, I had a good friend, and he got divorced, and it was just this long, ugly process. And he had been trying to make it work. And then he just had this epiphany. He just goes, wait a minute, I'm not going to die miserable and alone. F that. And now he's married and has a great wife, and it's just wonderful again. But it's just, it sucks. There's no question. But the status quo you're in sucks too. And if you're in a relationship that kind of sucks after 5 years, the odds are almost 100% it's going to be much worse than another few. It's not going to go the other direction.
Yeah. The first 5 years were awful, but then it turned around. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't heard
is
that
that a
before.
thing? Can you? I hated this. Even in any situation, I really hated this job, and it got better. No, it's just gonna suck more.
Yeah,
Or
Job
TV
2.
show. There's no TV
Yeah,
show
or
that gets
TV
goodness.
show.
What TV show gets good in the sixth season?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, Michael, it was lovely seeing you.
Oh, that's fast. Okay, I will see you in.
I have to. I have to
Yeah, I'll
go.
see you in a few weeks, and I look forward to
Yeah,
discussing
that
the
that sounds
book.
like fun.
And I hope everyone watching this from the bottom of my heart has a thriving and happy 2023. And I promise you, you have enough power in you to make it better than you think it is inevitably going to be.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so excited to see you. Congratulations on your book.
Thank
I
you.
will read it and we will talk again and I'll see you soon.